The pre-dawn air clung to the skin, a sooty, bitter blend of urban decay and the promise of caffeine, a signature aroma of the industrial zone. Jason Statham remained oblivious, his mind a locked vault containing a sequence of movements he was about to unleash. The loading dock's scarred surface served as his impromptu training ground. He initiated a punishing series of leaps, each landing a testament to controlled force. Economy of motion ruled, raw power reigned. Across the thoroughfare, Moretti's gym buzzed to life as the neon sign flickered, bathing the rain-streaked glass in a greasy, amber light. Inside, Tony the Hammer Moretti, his face a topographical map of old battles, nursed tepid coffee as he observed Statham. He'd witnessed countless fighters pass through, a revolving door of ambition and broken dreams. Yet this man radiated a different kind of energy, focused and driven. Statham flowed into a brutal Muay Thai drill, each strike a thunderclap against the makeshift heavy bag suspended between corroded steel beams. Sweat darkened his t-shirt, delineating the sculpted musculature forged through relentless discipline. The air thrummed with concussive force. From the penumbra of a nearby alley, a figure materialized. Maria Ria Rodriguez, clutching her sketchbook, moved with a quiet fluidity that masked the keen observation in her gaze. Settling against a relatively clean section of wall, she set her charcoal pencil in motion. Statham was a study in contained violence, a human sculpture shaped by self-denial. The harsh, emerging light etched deep furrows into his visage, revealing the unwavering resolve that propelled him. She sought to capture that, the very essence of the man beneath the hardened exterior. A scrawny stray, ribs prominent beneath a tangled coat, ambled into the loading dock, drawn by the percussive rhythm of Statham's assault. It whimpered, torn between approach and retreat. Statham, maintaining his cadence, betrayed a flicker of annoyance. He distrusted the unpredictable nature of animals. Rhea paused, her attention diverting from Statham to the dog. Compassion stirred within her, its vulnerability a stark juxtaposition to the calculated strength of her subject. Reaching into her pack, she produced a granola bar, offering it to the creature in a soothing tone. The dog hesitated, then warily advanced, sniffing her extended hand before snatching the offering and retreating to the shadows. Statham caught the interaction, his movements momentarily disrupted. A tick pulsed in his jaw. He resented being watched, especially during his training. It was a private right, a vital expulsion of the inner demons that plagued him. He channeled his irritation into renewed aggression, each blow a cathartic release. Focus was paramount. Readiness was essential. An image of Marco the Viper Vitali's self-satisfied smirk seared itself into his consciousness, stoking the flames of his fury. He visualized his fist impacting that arrogant jaw, silencing him permanently. The heavy bag shuddered violently, its chains protesting under the relentless assault. Across the street, Tony Moretti grunted, impressed despite himself. "That's the fire," he grumbled, taking another sip of his cooling brew. "Harness the anger, but don't let it consume you." He knew from hard-won experience that rage was a treacherous weapon. It could amplify strength, but it could also cloud judgment. And in their world, poor judgment was often fatal. Razor's edge. The rhythmic clang of metal on metal echoed across the loading dock, a steady pulse in the pre-dawn gloom. Statham, sweat plastering his dark t-shirt to his back, ignored the burn in his muscles as he slammed the weighted sledgehammer against the thick tire. Each strike was a release, a focused expulsion of pent-up energy. From the shadows near a stack of wooden pallets, a voice dripped with sarcasm. "Having a little trouble there, Grandpa? Need some Geritol to get you through the morning workout." Statham's jaw tightened, but he didn't break his rhythm. He knew that voice. Marco Razor Rossi, a stain on the city's underbelly, all flashy clothes and empty bravado. Razor thrived on stirring trouble, on getting a rise out of people. "Maybe you should try knitting instead," Razor continued, his voice louder now, laced with mocking laughter. He swaggered closer, his designer sneakers crunching on loose gravel. "Save your old bones the strain." Statham drove the sledgehammer down again, the force of the blow sending vibrations through his arms. He could feel Razor's eyes on him, hot and needling. Still, he remained silent, a monument of concentration. Rhea, perched in the mouth of a narrow alleyway across the street, sketched furiously in her notebook, capturing the scene unfolding before her. The tension crackled in the air like static electricity. She switched to her camera, framing a shot of Statham, his face a mask of stoic determination, with Razor looming in the background like a venomous spider. Razor, clearly frustrated by Statham's lack of reaction, ratcheted up the intensity. "Heard you used to be something special. A name people feared. Now look at you." reduced to swinging a hammer like some dock worker. Pathetic. He spat on the ground near Statham's feet. Maybe your wife left you for a younger guy? Someone who can still lift more than a teaspoon. This time, a flicker of something dark crossed Statham's face. He lowered the sledgehammer, the head resting heavily on the tire. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Razor, emboldened by the apparent effect of his words, pressed his advantage. What's the matter, old man? Cat got your tongue? Or did the truth finally hit you harder than that hammer? He puffed out his chest, striking a ridiculous pose. I bet I could take you down right here, right now. One hand tied behind my back. Statham finally looked up, his eyes like chips of flint. He didn't speak, but the message was clear. Razor was dancing on the razor's edge. One wrong step, one word too many, and he would find himself plummeting into the abyss. Rhea clicked her camera, capturing the moment. The raw, unfiltered animosity radiating from Statham was palpable, almost visible in the grainy image. She knew, with a certainty that sent a shiver down her spine, that this was just the beginning. Burning patience. The rhythmic thud of the sledgehammer striking the tire was the only sound Statham allowed himself to hear. Sweat plastered his dark t-shirt to his back, each swing a controlled explosion of power. He ignored the stinging in his palms, the burn in his lungs. Focus. That was all that mattered. Focus on the tire, focus on the rhythm, focus on silencing the voice. Still playing caveman, Statham? Razor's voice sliced through the air like a shard of glass. Statham squeezed the hammer handle, knuckles white. He forced himself to exhale slowly, deliberately. He wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Heard you lost another one, old-timer. Guess those fancy gym muscles don't mean much in a real fight, huh? Another swing. The tire shuddered. Statham pictured Razor's sneering face on the rubber, the satisfying crunch as the hammer connected. But no. Control. A few dock workers had paused to watch, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Razor, sensing an audience, puffed out his chest. Maybe you should stick to posing, Statham. Leave the fighting to the professionals. He punctuated the insult with a crude gesture. A ripple of laughter spread through the small crowd. Statham felt the heat rising in his neck. He gripped the hammer tighter. Across the street, Tony the Hammer Moretti watched from the darkened window of his gym. He sipped his lukewarm coffee, his gaze fixed on the scene unfolding by the docks. He knew Statham, knew the quiet intensity that simmered beneath the surface. He also knew Razor, a flash in the pan with more mouth than muscle. Moretti saw the way the crowd was feeding Razor's ego, saw the subtle shift in Statham's posture. He slammed his coffee cup down. Damn fool, he muttered. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. What's the matter, Statham? Cat got your tongue? Or are you too busy counting your wrinkles in the mirror? Razor continued, emboldened by the growing audience. He circled Statham, a predator enjoying his prey's torment. Maybe you need a walker instead of a sledgehammer, huh? Statham stopped. The hammer rested on the tire, its weight suddenly insignificant. He finally looked at Razor, his eyes like chips of flint. The laughter died down, replaced by a nervous silence. Razor, Moretti's voice boomed across the street, cutting through the tension. He was halfway to the docks, his bulk moving faster than anyone expected. Leave him be. You're playing with fire. Razor scoffed. Mind your own business, Tony. Just having a little fun. But even he seemed to sense the change in the air, the shift from playful taunting to something far more dangerous. Statham didn't take his eyes off Razor. The air crackled with unspoken threat. The crowd held its breath, sensing the storm about to break. Patience, a virtue he had always prided himself on, was burning away, leaving behind a cold, focused rage. The breaking point. The chain parted. Statham barely registered the snap. Lost in the exercise's demanding rhythm, the muscle ache was a welcome anchor. He discarded the fractured links, their weighty fall absorbed by the vast depot. Another casualty. Another week shaved off. Another stride forward. Feeling the years, Grandad? Razor's voice, sharp and laced with cheap cologne and feigned courage, cut through the air. He lounged against a pile of crates, arms folded, a sneer permanently etched on his features. A small gallery, drawn by the spiraling tension, had formed near the entrance, their muted murmurs fanning the flames. Statham remained oblivious. He seized a heftier chain, the chill of the steel a sharp contrast to the sweat glazing his skin. Razor wouldn't take the hint. Perhaps you should stick to what was it again? Pretending? This isn't a stage, Statham. This is reality. He punctuated the remark with a dismissive flick of his hand, casting off a droplet of sweat. Statham secured the chain around the thick metal beam, the links protesting under the mounting pressure. He mentally reviewed his plan: stance, respiration, force. Ignore the irritating buzz. Lost for words. Razor persisted, closing the distance. Or finally admitting you're out of your league? He was encroaching now, far too close. Statham tightened his grip. He inhaled the stale tobacco clinging to Razor's attire, the synthetic tang of his imitation leather jacket. He sensed the collective heat of the onlookers, their anticipation a tangible thing. He drew a slow, measured breath. Some doors are best left unopened, Statham replied, his voice a low, resonant growl that shattered the air like fractured glass. The crowd hushed, the sudden silence amplifying the persistent drip of condensation from the warehouse roof. Razor's smirk wavered, a fleeting expression of doubt crossing his features. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. Is that a threat? Razor challenged, advancing, his chest puffed out like a bantam rooster. Statham locked eyes with him. His own, typically creased with amusement or focused determination, were now like glints of obsidian, cold and unforgiving. It's professional advice. Take it. The atmosphere thrummed. The crowd held its breath as one. Across the street, in the shadowed alley, Rhea sketched feverishly, charcoal dancing across the page. She had it. The precise instant of confrontation, the raw, unleashed power emanating from Statham, the bravado draining from Razor's countenance. It was a portrait of impending reckoning. Razor, emboldened by the captive audience, camouflaged his apprehension with a forced guffaw. "Oh, I'm shaking in my boots," he scoffed, the words thin and unconvincing. "Shaking that I'll have to teach an old-timer a thing or two." He took another step, violating Statham's space. "Gonna run home to mommy, Statham?" Statham dropped the chain. The sudden clang reverberated through the dock, obliterating Razor's mirth. He moved, closing the remaining space between them. "No," he murmured, his voice barely audible, yet each word a honed blade. "I'm going to make you." First blood. The rhythmic thud of Statham's fist against the heavy bag was the only sound for a long minute. Sweat plastered his dark t-shirt to his back as he worked, each punch a calculated burst of controlled power. Razor leaned against a stack of crates, a sneer twisting his lips. He'd been running his mouth for 10 minutes, each jab more personal than the last, but Statham hadn't even flinched. It was unnerving. "Cat got your tongue, tough guy?" Razor spat, pushing off the crates. "Or are you too busy playing Rocky Balboa to realize you're about to get your ass kicked?" Statham ignored him, pivoting smoothly around the bag, delivering a brutal series of uppercuts. He was close to his limit, pushing himself harder than usual, trying to burn away the simmering anger that Razor's words had stirred. Razor finally lost his patience. He stalked forward, closing the distance between them. "You think you're better than me, huh? Too good to even acknowledge me?" He punctuated the question with a shove, hard enough to throw Statham off balance. Statham stumbled, his concentration broken. That was all Razor needed. With a guttural yell, he launched himself forward, his fist a blur aimed squarely at Statham's jaw. It was a cheap shot, a sucker punch delivered with venomous intent. But Statham, despite the momentary lapse, was still lightning quick. He saw the punch coming, registering the trajectory in a microsecond. Instead of trying to block, which would have left him vulnerable, he moved. A subtle shift of his weight, a barely perceptible duck of his head, and Razor's fist whistled harmlessly past his ear. The force of Razor's missed punch threw him off balance. Statham used the opportunity, spinning smoothly, using Razor's momentum against him. He grabbed Razor's outstretched arm, twisting it sharply, forcing him to stumble forward again. The small crowd that had gathered at the edge of the loading dock gasped. Until that moment, it had just been posturing, trash talk echoing in the cavernous space. Now, the air crackled with anticipation. Someone hooted, another cheered. The scent of diesel fumes mingled with the rising tide of adrenaline. Razor, face contorted with fury and surprise, tried to pull free, but Statham held firm. He wasn't attacking, not yet. He was simply defending, redirecting, buying himself time to assess the situation. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Razor's. The taunting grin had vanished, replaced by a flicker of fear. "You wanted a fight," Statham said, his voice low and dangerous, barely audible above the growing murmur of the crowd. "You got one." He released Razor's arm, stepping back, his fists raised. The fight had begun, turning the tide. The clang of steel on steel echoed around the deserted loading dock. Statham, sweat plastering his dark t-shirt to his back, ignored Razor's incessant barking. He was using a heavy steel girder, swinging it in wide arcs, each movement precise, controlled. Razor, circling like a jackal, punctuated the air with insults. "Come on, old man. That all you got? My grandma hits harder with her purse." He spat on the cracked concrete. "You're embarrassing yourself." Statham remained silent, his focus absolute. He feinted with the girder, the sudden movement forcing Razor to backpedal. The taunts had lost their sting, They were just background noise. He adjusted his grip, the cold steel a familiar comfort. Razor, emboldened by Statham's apparent disinterest, lunged. A clumsy, telegraph jab aimed for Statham's face. Statham sidestepped with a fluid grace that belied his size. The girder swung down, not connecting, but the wind it generated ruffled Razor's hair. "Missed me," Razor crowed, recovering his balance. But the grin faltered as he saw Statham's eyes. Gone was the placid indifference. Now, they were hard, calculating. Razor launched another flurry of punches, faster this time, fueled by adrenaline and desperation to regain the upper hand. Statham met each attack with a subtle parry, deflecting the blows with minimal effort. Razor's fists slammed against steel, against unforgiving muscle, never finding their mark. Each blocked punch seemed to chip away at Razor's confidence. From across the street, in the window of his gym, Tony the Hammer Moretti watched the unfolding scene. He'd been about to head home, but the commotion outside had caught his attention. He recognized Razor immediately, a flashy, loudmouth punk who thought he was tougher than he was. But the other guy, the Hammer, had seen enough fights in his life to recognize true skill. The way he moved, the economy of motion, the utter control. This wasn't just some dock worker. He saw Razor wind up for a haymaker, telegraphing the punch like a neon sign. Statham didn't even flinch. Instead, as Razor committed, Statham stepped inside the wild swing, using Razor's momentum against him. A short, brutal elbow connected with Razor's ribs. The sound, a sickening thud, carried even across the street. Razor crumpled, air hissing from his lungs. He clutched his side, his face contorted in pain. The taunts died in his throat. Statham lowered the girder, the clang echoing once more in the sudden silence. He looked down at Razor, his expression unreadable. The Hammer swore under his breath. He grabbed his coat. This was about to get ugly. He knew that look. It was the look of a man who had had enough. He hurried out of the gym, the bell above the door jingling sharply as he went. He needed to intervene before Statham did something he regretted. Or worse, before Razor got seriously hurt. The tide had definitively turned. Dirty tricks. Laughter, sharp as shattered glass, ricocheted around the loading dock's corrugated metal. "Still playing coy, Statham? Mr. Tough Guy turning timid? You look like a marble statue baking in the sun." A gob of spit landed perilously close to Statham's toes, a deliberate insult etched in expectoration. Statham remained unresponsive, the metronomic thump of his fists against the punching bag his sole reply. His dark t-shirt clung to him, a second skin molded to his sculpted back, each muscle flexing with brutal grace. Razor was a persistent gnat, a buzzing annoyance, but Statham wouldn't yield to the distraction. Focus was the only weapon he needed to hone right now. Razor's voice gained an edge. "What's the problem, Statham? Scared of ruining your manicure? Need a little pampering before you even consider throwing a punch?" He closed the distance, a predatory glint lighting his eyes. "Or are you just plain terrified? Frightened of what I might do to that pretty mug of yours?" Finally, the rhythmic blows ceased. The heavy bag swung like a hypnotist's pendulum, marking the passage of time. Statham pivoted, his usually warm gaze now resembling honed steel. "Finished flapping your gums, Rossi?" A feral grin split Razor's tanned face, a brief glimpse of predatory teeth. "Just warming up the crowd." He shifted his weight, hands loose, a coiled spring of aggression. Then, with a theatrical flourish, he slipped on a pair of fingerless gloves. They appeared unremarkable at first, worn leather, but as he worked his fingers, a subtle density became apparent. The knuckles possessed an unnatural heft. A wave of disquiet rippled through the onlookers clustered at the dock's edge. Even the most unobservant could sense something amiss. "What are those, Rossi?" someone shouted, their voice laced with disbelief. "Weighted gloves? That's a cheap shot." Razor unleashed another laugh, abrasive and grating. "Fair? Life doesn't deal a fair hand, amigo. And neither do I." A wink preceded his attack as he lunged at Statham. The opening salvo was a wide, looping right. Taken aback by the sudden ferocity and the unanticipated power behind the blow, Statham barely managed to deflect it with his forearm. The impact sent tremors up his arm, a deep throb that resonated in his bones. He stumbled, taken aback by the sheer force. Razor capitalized, unleashing a torrent of blows, each punch carrying significantly more punch. Statham was forced into a defensive posture, blocking and deflecting, his movements tight and precise. He felt the growing burn in his muscles, the acute strain of resisting the barrage. This wasn't the planned sparring session, it was a raw battle for survival. From the sanctuary of a shadowed alley, Maria Rodriguez's camera whirred to life. Flash, flash, flash. She moved with practiced efficiency, framing each image, capturing the primal intensity of the exchange, the momentary surprise etched on Statham's face, the cruel satisfaction in Razor's eyes. She zoomed, focusing on the gloves, the obvious bulge that betrayed the metal concealed within the leather. This was the evidence, irrefutable proof of Rossi's deceit. This wasn't about honor or respect, it was a blatant act of sabotage. Realizing mere defense was a losing strategy, Statham recalibrated. He stopped absorbing the blows and began to move, circling Razor, utilizing his superior speed to evade the heavier strikes. He desperately needed to find a chink in Razor's armor, an opportunity to exploit his arrogance. He had to shift the momentum, and quickly, before the weighted gloves inflicted irreversible damage. Urban warfare. The metallic tang of rust and diesel fumes filled the air as Statham continued his kata, unfazed. Razor's jeers bounced off the corrugated iron walls of the loading dock, each insult a pebble thrown at a fortress. "What's the matter, Grandpa? Joints stiffen up on you? Thought you were supposed to be some kind of machine." Razor strutted, hands loosely at his sides, radiating false confidence. "Guess I was wrong. Just an old man playing dress-up." Statham finished his sequence, a controlled exhale his only acknowledgement. Then a shift, not dramatic, but a subtle tightening of muscles, a focus that sharpened the air around him. He moved, not towards Razor, but away. He flowed between stacks of crates, using the confined space to his advantage. Razor's heavier frame was a liability here, his swagger useless in the narrow aisles. "Running, old man? That's what I thought." Razor's voice echoed, closer now, fueled by perceived victory. He lunged, a wild haymaker aimed at Statham's head. Statham wasn't there. He ducked under a low-hanging conveyor belt, emerging behind Razor. Before Razor could turn, Statham was on him. A precise kick swept Razor's legs out from under him, sending him sprawling onto the gritty concrete. Razor roared, scrambling to his feet. He pulled a knife, a glint of steel reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. "Okay, Grandpa," he snarled. "Time to get serious." Statham didn't flinch. He studied Razor, his gaze locked on the knife. Razor lunged again, the blade a silver blur. Statham sidestepped, using the momentum of Razor's attack against him. He grabbed Razor's wrist, the grip like a vice. A sharp twist, a sickening crack, and the knife clattered onto the ground. Razor screamed, clutching his hand. Statham didn't give him a chance to recover. He closed the distance, a flurry of strikes aimed at Razor's pressure points. A jab to the solar plexus, a knee to the thigh, a hammer blow to the temple. Razor stumbled, his eyes glazed with pain and confusion. Statham finished it with a brutal uppercut, lifting Razor off his feet. He landed hard, his body limp. The loading dock was silent, save for Razor's ragged breathing. Statham stood over him, his face impassive. The only sound was the distant hum of the city, a mechanical heartbeat in the urban wasteland. The lesson had been delivered. Humility, like respect, was earned, not given. And sometimes it was extracted. Respect earned. The loading dock resonated with the metallic scream of steel meeting steel, each hammer blow against the gargantuan tire a display of Statham's brute strength. Sweat beaded on his temples, clinging to the dark fringe plastered there, and guttural breaths were his sole reply to the goading. Razor, lounging against a stack of pallets, offered a sardonic grin. For a solid hour he'd been needling Statham, each taunt sharper than the last. The veteran hadn't so much as twitched. "Gonna stonewall me all day, Gramps?" Razor's voice dripped with insolence. "Thought they called you a legend. Looks more like a worn-out pack mule from here." Statham brought the hammer crashing down once more, the reverberation traveling up through the concrete. He discarded the tool with a resonant thud, the sound slicing through the air. Finally, he pivoted, his gaze unwavering and direct. "You mistake my silence for acquiescence, Razor. A grave miscalculation." Razor puffed up, emboldened by what he perceived as a delayed reaction. "Oh, really? What's your play then? Show me this legendary fire." With unsettling swiftness, Statham closed the gap between them. No fist clenched, no jaw tightened. He simply stood, emanating an almost palpable aura of self-mastery. True power isn't about mindless aggression, Razor. It's discerning when to unleash it and when to refrain. It's about honoring the process, respecting your comrade, and having regard for yourself. His tone was a low, resonant growl, bearing the weight of years lived and lessons learned. You sought a confrontation. You encountered someone who refused to indulge you. That, Razor, is your defeat. Accept it with a modicum of grace. The air thrummed with suppressed energy. Razor's bluster seemed to leak away like air from a punctured bladder. He averted his eyes, scuffing the floor with his boot. Silence descended, broken only by the distant urban drone. At last, he mumbled, I crossed the line, Statham. My apologies. You're right. I was disrespectful to you and to the principles of this training. Statham gave a single nod, a measured acknowledgement. Humility is a hard-won prize, Razor. Don't squander it. He retrieved the sledgehammer, settling it across his shoulder. The unspoken message hung heavy. The discourse was concluded. Razor observed him a moment longer, a spark of understanding flickering in his gaze. Then, his swagger noticeably muted, he turned and departed. Statham resumed his exercise, each hammer swing a demonstration of precision and controlled force. The metallic ring returned, now imbued with a different timbre, a resonance of discipline, of reverence, of peace restored. From the umbral recess of a nearby alley, Rhea lowered her sketchbook. She documented it all, the challenge, the admission, the quiet focus as Statham returned to his task. The sketch transcended mere replication. It was a study in attained respect, an exploration of the subtle strength inherent in restraint. The harsh light of the loading dock seemed to mellow on the page, illuminating the quiet dignity of a man who chose self-control over demolition. She closed the book, the scene seared into her memory. It was a narrative worth conveying.